Good morning. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. My name is Jay Tiefenbrunn and I am very pleased to be your Director of Music Ministries. I'd like to invite you to join in singing this morning with hymn number 323 in the gray hymnal, Break Not the Circle. Hymn number 323, please rise in body or in spirit as you're so moved and join in the singing. Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not that circle, make it wider still, till it includes, embraces all the living. Come wonder at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken, and people keep no score of wrong and pride, but will that human bonds remain unbroken. Join then the movement of the love that frees, till people of whatever race or nation will truly be themselves, stand on their feet, see eye to eye with laughter and elation. Our second song is in the turquoise hymnal, number 1060, As We Sing of Hope and Joy Today, this melody by Elizabeth Alexander. Number 1060, Jaden and Holling are going to play through the whole thing once for us, and then we will sing together. As we sing of hope and joy today, and misery to spare, if a crumbling world we would renew, we must sing no ordinary song. Peals from a noisy gong will never do. In every breath compassion must belong. Let us sing our greatest hopes contain, laughter of a well-fed child, its tune roofs over every heartbeat, its refrain, its harmony from peaceful cities hewn. Sing of joy while hammering each nail. Sing of hope while pulling every weed. So shall we sing together and prevail. May every alleluia bear a seed. And our third song this morning is The Fire of Commitment, number 1028 in your turquoise hymnal. Number 1028, The Fire of Commitment. Are my bell ringers ready? Are you ready? From the light of From the of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice brought by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Good morning. Please take a moment to greet each other.
For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul.
Good morning. My name is Steve Harush. I'm a member of this congregation. I'd also like to welcome our guest speaker, David Dark, back for another visit. I'm really looking forward to it. I'd like to invite you into the spirit of worship with these words from Genevieve Taggart. Take up these talents. Use the new, indelible theme, norm and extreme. O disobedient muse, your country calls you home. The night is coming. Come.
Good morning. My story today starts on a warm, sunny afternoon on the second floor of a palace. And the king is sitting there with his minister looking out over this prosperous city that he rules. And he says, "Isn't this just magnificent?" And he's eating some rice cakes with some honey on them. And a drop of honey fell on the windowsill. And the minister gets up, and the king says, "Where are you going?" No, don't worry about it. It's not a problem. And so the minister comes back, and they're sitting there again, looking out over the city, and paying no attention to that little drop of honey, which now drips down the windowsill to the ground and begins to attract some buzzing flies. Well, then a lizard did not see flies. That lizard saw a feast. And so the lizard was out there darting out its tongue, consuming those flies. And the minister says, "Your Majesty, do you think maybe we should just go ahead and clean it up a little bit? You know, the market is beginning to open, people are going around." "No, it is not our problem. Don't worry about it." Okay, well, the lizard is there, and of course, one of the shop owners has just let her cat out. And the cat sees the lizard. And the cat goes up to the lizard and begins playing with it. You know the way cats play with their prey. Well, and the minister's looking, and the king says, no, I know what you're thinking. Don't worry. It's not our problem." And then another shopkeeper opens up and sends out her dog. And the dog sees the cat. And the dog approaches the cat and begins to bark. And the king says, no, not our problem. Those pets belong to the market people, and they'll take care of it. Well, of course, the dog and the cat are going at it now, and they're having a fight. And out comes the woman who owns the cat, her precious cat, being beaten up by a dog. And she takes her broom, and she goes over there, and she goes after that dog. Well, the minister is watching this, trying very hard not to say anything. And then the dog's owner sees what's going on, and she comes out with her broom and starts beating on that cat. And pretty soon, the owners are beating on each other. And the friend of the person who has the cat comes out and starts fighting for her, and the friend of the dog owner comes out and starts fighting for her. And the minister says, "Your Majesty, don't you think this might be getting a little bit out of hand? Don't worry about it. This is what we have police for. It's not our problem. Have a little more puffed rice and honey." And so they sit there and they pay no attention whatsoever. And sure enough, the police come along. But what do you know? These police are all dog and cat lovers, one or the other, not both at the same time. And so they take sides too. And this fight escalates, and the minister is really fidgety, and he's holding his rice cake. He hasn't taken a single bite out of it. He can't deal with it. And the king just says, "Not our problem. If need be, the army will come. Okay? Don't worry about it. And so, sure enough, pretty soon the army comes along. And then there is looting, and there is rioting, and things are burning, and everything. Before daybreak, this prosperous, magnificent city has been reduced to nothing but rubble. And the king is still at the same window looking down on this city he loved. And he turns to his minister and he says, "Well, maybe that drop of honey was our problem." That's the end of the story, and we will now sing our children over to Morgan House using the blessing on the inside back cover of the gray hymnal.
Good morning. My name is Lori Stevens. I'm a lay leader of this congregation, and it is my pleasure to welcome you here in the sanctuary and those joining us online to worship this morning. In order to reach a wider community than those able to be physically present on Sunday mornings, our services are live streamed on YouTube and Facebook. Joys and concerns are not live streamed or recorded. Before I continue, let me remind you to please silence your cell phones. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation, we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We deepen our relationships as we create a compassionate, welcoming community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. We ask you to wear the paper name tags because it helps us get to know you better. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you may find it here. Whether you are new to Unitarian Universalism or visiting from another UU congregation, we hope you will stop by the welcome table after the service to have questions answered. People become members of this congregation by signing the membership book and supporting the church with their time and finances. If you are considering joining the church, please contact our assistant minister, Denise Gouch. Following the service, we hope everyone will enjoy coffee and fellowship in the social area, where you will also find information about current opportunities for engagement and reflection. There are many announcements in the weekly bulletin, which I hope you will take home and read. Thank you.
I invite you to take a deep breath, settle yourselves in, close your eyes, and think about what's happened to you over the course of this week. There may have been moments that touched your spirit, touched your heart, or struck them to the bone. If you have such a moment that you'd like to share with this congregation, you are welcome to fill out a yellow slip and in your pew with that. And our lay minister for this week, Becky Bowman, will read it aloud. You can also place a silent stone if you'd rather do that. Together we will share our joys and concerns for this week. Spirit of life and love, we ask that you hold all of the joys and the hurts and the sorrows and the excitements that we have in our heart that remained unspoken, that we have as a community, that extend from just this church but also outside to those we are worried or that we are happy and we're joyful and celebrating with, to the larger community who are suffering in so many ways, but also celebrating many wonderful things as well. We ask that you hold all of this together in your heart. Amen, and blessed be. So in just a moment, we'll have our offertory, but before that, we'll have a stewardship testimony by Luana Edwards. But just a little quick moment about the offertory. Our Share the Plate recipient this month is Safe Haven. You can read about Safe Haven in your order of service. It is the only sheltered housing program of its kind in Middle Tennessee. It takes whole families. It's really unusual about that. And about half of our loose donations that are not dedicated directly to the church will be going to that over the course of this month. If you'd like, you can give online or at our website. There's information at the order of service of how you do this right at the bottom over here. Our website is firstuunash.org. As always, your generosity is so appreciated for the nurturement of this community together.
Good morning. My name is Lawana Edwards, and I'm a member of this church. Marguerite asked me to give a very brief testimony about why I support the life of this church. About 2 years ago, I had the fortunate opportunity to go to a spiritual retreat in Peru. And while I was there, I was able to connect with about 6 or 7 young people. They were probably late 20s, early 30s. And one of the surprising things that I left that retreat feeling was a great deal of hope. I felt a great deal of hope because these 6 or 7 young people were some of the kindest, most compassionate people I have ever met. I was a stranger to them, but they were wonderful and embraced me, and we have still stayed connected. That we are, in this day and age, I think that's incredibly important. People ask me what I do when I'm in RE and what do I do, and I said, I get to play with the little kids. There's not much more fun than that, and I have always enjoyed it. I've worked in the RE program with the little kids for a long time, and I hope to continue to do that. I just think that we need to support these young people. We need to encourage them because they are our future in our community, small community and big community. So, if you believe that we need to be encouraging and supporting kind, compassionate human beings, I strongly encourage you to, give as you can to this church with your time and money. Thank you.
The reading this morning is by Ilya Kaminsky. We lived happily during the war. And when they bombed other people's houses, we protested, but not enough. We opposed them, but not enough. I was in my bed. Around my bed, America was falling, invisible house by invisible house by invisible house. I took a chair outside and watched the sun. In the 6th month of a disastrous reign in the house of money, in the street of money, in the city of money, in the country of money, our great country of money, we, forgive us, lived happily during the war.
Our middle song is number 1003 in the turquoise hymnal, Where Do We Come From? This is a part song, and I'm going to invite you to sing whatever part resonates with you this morning. You might want to ask the question, well, they all ask the question, where do we come from? But maybe what touches you today is the mystery. Life is a riddle or a mystery. So we'll sing through the whole thing once, repeating each phrase twice. And then we'll just chant together with all the parts. You can change parts. It's okay. There's no right or wrong way to sing this piece. Let's rise in body or in spirit as we're so moved and sing number 1003. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Repeat. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Line 2. Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Line 3. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle or a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Line 4. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Your choice. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
For the meditation this morning, I'm going to read a short essay by Margaret Rankel, and follow that.
Hello, everybody. I believe in resonances, and I believe in, I think it will be obvious to you as well. So I hope I don't just bring obviousness. I hope I bring encouragement and energy to all of the goodness that you're already up to. I'll note that I'm going to open with a Sister Coretta Kent poem, and I'm going to close with a Denise Levertov poem, and everything in between is an effort to spell out what I take to be their understanding of the liturgical, and maybe your understanding of the liturgical as well. And if I offer anything that you think, no way, you can't say that, that's not true, I welcome back and forth in there. We'll have coffee afterwards, yes. And from here on out, because I am crazily present on social media, a social media fast or something. You know, I want to hear that too. Okay, so this is from a book called Footnotes and Headlines. It's Sister Coretta Kent. And on resonances again, come and Selma, a number of things that I prepared without consulting anyone have shown up already, and that's really encouraging to me. This is Sister Coretta Kent. All the planning and the grocery ordering makes it easier to laugh and sing and get angry and sad with each other. And because we do these things in a ceremonial way, we get it out of our system and become less able to ever think of destroying each other. So if the small bodies could remember ceremonially, they could understand the celebrations of other communities. And then the great revolution could take place. The whole human running race could finally sit down in a big circle and eat together. And having once shared a meal, could no longer be enemies. They would know who they were through these expressions and could somehow work it out, having admitted the importance of playing it out. Then we could all get up and run again. Always there remains this need to explain to each other that we are good. We all have a constant need to be reaffirmed. The single human needs this. The whole human race needs a yay, needs the large ceremonial pat on the back that says, come on, we can make it. Having begun with Sister Coretta Kent, I want to ease into this idea of, well, you perhaps see the title, Policy is Liturgy. And I want to argue that policy, government policy, company policy, whatever it might be, is liturgy. And liturgy is the work of the people. There are good liturgies, there are bad liturgies, there are counter liturgies of goodness and wholeness with which we can overcome liturgies that are that twist or encourage us to imagine one another in something other than a deeply holy way. So with that, and I'm going to be asking, and goodness, the story about the honey really got to this too, I'm going to ask us to try to think in a granular way about liturgies, our responses, our signals, the way we speak of each other, the way we speak of other people. And at some point I'm going to say, go granular or go home. Meaning we have to be precise because specificity outs tyranny, and generalization is tyranny's oxygen supply, however that tyranny operates, the inner tyrant, the outer tyrant, all that kind of thing. We are what we pretend to be, Kurt Vonnegut once observed. So we must be very careful about what we pretend to be. As usual, Vonnegut's provoking us with something funny and paradoxical and intensely true. We know feelingly that we fake it till we make it. We know the drill. We play along with norms, strengthening their power as we go, borrowing a sense of legitimacy from that which we normalize with one another. We trade. I know sometimes when I'm listening to someone, I have to do one of these, where I'm taking what's mine and what's true, and I'm kind of defending myself against, it sounds kind of hocus pocus, but utterances and ways of talking that I can't abide, that don't really sit well with me. If we aren't careful when it comes to this work of granular legitimation, we learn to stop asking whether or not the reigning legitimacies in which we live and move are in fact good or worthy or true. When they aren't, our pretense, our playing along, can be a form of earnest wickedness. I've gained power, a tiny world, cozy in its way, of fake legitimacy, while slowly and dutifully forfeiting my soul, my spirit, my intuition, my ability to think it through. I've become what I've played at and lost any righteous sense of self and others in exchange for status. Henry David Thoreau described the way his own conscience sometimes succumbed to such peer pressure thusly. This is Thoreau. The greater part of what my neighbors call good, I believe in my soul to be bad. And if I repent of anything, it is very likely my own good behavior, I guess bracketing it, in the presence of what I know is wrong in the 1800s for Thoreau. And then he asked the question, what demon possessed me that I behaved so well? What was it that made me go along with that? Thoreau believed that in large part we are what we abide. We are, of course, responsible for our own words and actions, but we're also responsible for the conflicts we avoid to more effectively get by, the lies we allow others to voice and propagate unchallenged in our presence. Our conflict avoidance adds up to someone else's suffering. Thoreau worried over all the ways he played along and didn't raise a fuss in the face of terrors his government enacted and aided, and the subtle fashion in which his own behavior, by proving polite and acceptable, abided in justice. We can't ultimately escape the living fact of our relationship with others in this scheme, in the first hymn, this circle that we acknowledge. Oh, this is just so heavy, but y'all are used to it. I mean, you're talking about this all the time. The circle that we break or sustain with everything that we do. At our best, we know this circle, this inescapable network of mutuality, the fact of kinship, and celebrate it despite and somehow, we celebrate it and somehow manage recognition of it in what we say and do. Or as the mystic practitioner of public broadcasting, Fred Rogers once put it, as if calling to us from within the circle, we are intimately related, may we never even pretend that we are not, but pretend we do. And our pretense costs the whole of our world dearly. Love's labor is lost again and again, and the silences that surround the fact of our social catastrophes, help us to see that these silences are in fact orchestrated if we're willing to acknowledge it. To borrow Octavia Butler's phrase, we are the ordinary people who fund and underwrite that which is sanctioned as legal and proper. How might we begin to overcome the ugly ordering of resources? Is this making sense to everybody? I need a nod or something to feel like, okay, thank you. In this idea that we become what we normalize, I want to place, liturgy is where I'm headed, but I want to let politics, and again, I just know this is preaching to the choir, but I want to note that wherever two or more are gathered, politics, like religion, like economy, these are abstractions with which we try to contain our conflicts, but the abstractions don't ultimately serve. They dissolve upon contact with what we know to be going on. With that in mind, a helpful adage for me is a line from Wendell Berry's poem, How to Be a Poet. He said, there are no unsacred places. Perhaps you've heard this. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. So our every move sacramentalizes or fails to acknowledge the already underway sacredness all around us. Rebecca Solnit similarly says, any belief that is acted on makes the world in its image. So back to this granular thing, we're able to sacramentalize land, resources, people over and over again. Like our religion, our liturgies are never more nor less than what we actually do with our energies. And when we try to divide the world up in such a way that a suicide bombing is religiously motivated, but the crowd killing of alleged anonymous militants with a drone strike is always born of the always reasonable demands of national security, we leave those dysfunctional orderings of human life, the bad liturgies we underwrite with our getting, spending, voting, tax dollars, and our consuming unchallenged. We let ourselves off the hook when we imagine we can keep any behavior outside of the sphere of our liturgies, what I like to call my witness. Witness is a helpful word for me to bring together all of those abstractions, because my witness isn't what I say I believe, it's what I believe, which is only known by what I do. It's the sum output of everything I'm up to. All liturgy, all the time, cupcakes, landmines, comic books, sticky notes, cell phones, and social media feeds. My liturgical witness is always on. There is no off switch to my worship, to my witness. I believe we begin to overcome the divisions by exercising certain duties of resistance when it comes to the stories we sponsor and sustain, all liturgies. When we go with the flow, we are often operating to the detriment of ourselves and others, and as Astra Taylor tells us, we're all ancestors and successors of one kind or another. Let's see here. So the question of what I will value from day to day is always on. What will my liturgies, the sum of my output, which is and will have been my witness, my soul, look like? To ring true, to sound one clear note with my whole life, it might be appropriate to think of my witness, preaching to the choir again, as my duty, my dharma, my sacred responsibility to the people around me. If it's right to say that my values are being visually systematized in all that I say and do, I begin to see that I have more avenues for faithfulness, for life and liveliness than the conventional divisions allow for. and my aphorism to try and overcome what I take to be these false dichotomies coming at me in myriad ways is slightly longer version of the title, Policy is Liturgy Writ Large. The liturgies that we bring, that we consent to, all of this. This aphorism, well, when we think of it this way, when we think of all of our work as liturgical, we gain some things. What might we gain if we begin to consider our government's response to asylum seekers, the climate crisis, our use of natural resources as relentlessly liturgical? What do we lose when we refuse to? We dwell in the fact of the establishment of perverse liturgies, and one way to rethink it, again, is to perhaps adopt this language. Rebecca Solnit tells us, the revolt against brutality begins with a revolt against the language that hides that brutality. So I'm placing liturgy here and witness in front of us as a way of talking this through. I was in danger of verbalizing my moral impulses out of existence. I was in danger, I'm sharing a story now, I was in danger of verbalizing my moral impulses out of existence. These words, they show up in an Adrian Rich poem, but they're taken from a figure called Daniel Berrigan, who I'm guessing some of y'all have heard of. Y'all know the name Daniel Berrigan? Daniel Berrigan, yes, some nods. Okay. These are the words, I wish they were more known, by someone I think of as a kind of artisan of hopefulness, an artisan of human seriousness, Berrigan. I was in danger of verbalizing my moral impulses out of existence, names, in a wonderfully specific way, the challenge that we face in our use of language, the way we describe ourselves to ourselves even. Berrigan brings us, I think, a prophetic understanding of the world, a world that Berrigan insisted God so loves, the world that is our home, the world for which we are, all of us, in so many ways responsible. World as gift, inheritance, trust. As a poet and a priest for whom the entire world, down to the minutest particular, is charged with the grandeur of the divine, he viewed the cosmos, and I believe you do too, as a space in which there are no unrelated phenomena. He would also echo, I believe, with Parker Palmer, that every fact is a function of relationship. So with relation as the starting point, we have Berrigan. These words, I was in danger of verbalizing my moral impulses out of existence, name the mental struggle. William Blake calls it a mental fight, in which he's going to try to live out his convictions, his commitment to the beauty of the world, in the minute particulars, we could say. William Blake says that if you're going to love well, you have to labor well the minute particulars. That might be one way of fleshing out this idea of going granular as well. So in his effort with his brother and with a group that came to be called the Catonsville Nine, he brought his liturgical forms, his counter-liturgy, to the war-making liturgies, the paperwork of the United States government. And in May of 1968, he joined 7 other activists and walked into a draft board in Catonsville, Maryland, removed the papers of young men who had been scheduled to be conscripted, and conducted the prayerful burning of draft files with homemade napalm, apologizing for their fracture of what they could no longer abide as good order, and noting that they were no longer able to say peace, peace when there is no peace. They observed that they thought it fitting to burn paper instead of children. And as the liturgy they constructed in that moment, they said, we could not, so help us God, do otherwise. And as the fire burned, they punctuated this purposeful ritual, this raid on the sacrosanct, by reciting the Lord's Prayer. What was accomplished? They went to jail. The Berrigan brothers were placed on the cover of Newsweek, and this actually shows up in me and Julio down by the schoolyard. Paul Simon, radical priest, on the cover of Newsweek. Give me a show of hands on Daniel Berrigan, just so I get if you know the name Daniel Berrigan. Okay. It's interesting because that moment is like I think it's kind of like a repressed memory in American history, because often when I'll bring him up, people from all alleged sides of the human barnyard, if you're men of a particular age who surprise me, say, oh, wow, I loved that he did that. But they hadn't thought of him in decades. It was this interesting moment of sacred and secular, the alleged distinction between the sacred and secular being dramatized and rejected. He's also in The Mission, if you recall that film with Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons. He's the elderly Jesuit in there. It was a palpable hit in the sense that it made news for a time. Similar actions were undertaken and continue into our day, most recently by Sister Megan Rice and her companions. These endeavors are often staged under the moniker of the Plowshares movement and pose, as the prophetic always does, the question of authority. And I would put in there as well Bree Newsom bringing down the flag in South Carolina a few years back, Justin Jones in our own context trying to bring down the removal of the Nathan Bedford Forrest statue in our state capitol. To really recall, so all of such actions ask the questions: to whom and what are we rightly subject? What shall we credit? How shall we adhere? To what are we devoted? And to insist that all policy is liturgy of one kind or another and that we're responsible for our liturgies is to begin to recognize membership in what is sometimes referred to as beloved community. Perhaps disruption is essential to the right vision and right practice modeled by beloved community. Spirit knows no division, and when it's pursued with any depth at all, the question of beloved community naturally overflows whatever boundaries we've erected to somehow assert that one section of the human barnyard can be made definitively separate from the other. This, the saying goes, doesn't have anything to do with that, but beloved community, same as it ever was, insists otherwise, as it invites us yet again to refuse the dualistic thinking that renders us sad and confused and very often angry, and opts for the hidden wholeness that we can even see in the people that we think of as toxic and beyond our ability to communicate with. I'm going to ask, because the clock is broken, how are we? We have 10 minutes, fantastic. A little more from Berrigan, if I may, in thinking through the unacknowledged inevitabilities of our time in terms of security and what we think of as security, what we think of as perceived necessity. As a teacher of 15-year-olds at St. Peter's Prep in Jersey City in the late 1940s, Berrigan began to experience a tension within his own vocation as a teacher. From a long line of thoughtful people who'd inspired and taught him, he'd picked up the habit of mulling aloud over what he himself was discovering in his own reading. And the class discussion one particular day in New Jersey brought to mind Ronald Knox's book, God and the Atom. Among the speculations entertained in Knox's text was one path not taken in World War II. Among a few Americans, conventional wisdom concerning President Truman's faith-based approach to defeating Japan, we might say, had yet to completely concretize, and Berrigan voiced aloud Knox's observation that the United States could have easily opted to drop the bomb on an uninhabited Pacific island as a show of force instead of incinerating thousands of people. While he doubtless understood that it was even then, late 40s, a controversial idea, Berrigan was surprised by the knee-jerk hostility he provoked among these not-so-righteously catechized young people. We did good. It was them or us, they exclaimed. In just a few formative years, they had come to believe and even insist that the escalation of violence and the needful human sacrifice that fate sometimes decreed must never be questioned. What's done is done, no reflection, confession, or repentance allowed. And in a profound sense, they'd been formed to believe and know, with accompanying heat, that entertaining alternatives to the path of necessary annihilation in this instance was tantamount to treason. Among these young people, he saw that a very different spiritual formation than the one he hoped to build upon had long ago been ingrained. Their hearts and minds had been enlisted in the direction of unreasoning aggression for some time, and the learning space was the entirety of American culture and its self-understanding on the world stage. As a young educator, Berrigan was himself receiving an education. Throughout his life, these clarifying moments in conversations with students, parishioners, superiors, and professional politicians would continue, and a picture would emerge. The deep formation of mistaken identity, we have to humiliate others in order to survive, had been deeply entrenched in many a human psyche. Berrigan's task as a minister of Word and Sacrament was emerging, and he described the realization of his own, the field, we could say, in this way. We knew who we were in the act of war. Ancestors were, first of all, warriors. In that degree only they merited honor, ancestor to child. It was presumed that violence needed no teaching. It took care of itself. It was nonviolence, civility, that required discipline and instruction and was under perennial assault. If we bring into this I want to place Policy as Liturgy in front of us as a work of moral, poetic improvisation with which we have to draw on one another to figure out different ways of being. I also want to recount, and it's recounted in the March trilogy, the John Lewis comic book. Has anybody seen that one? It's worth finding. It's a 3-volume trilogy, and it is Lewis recounting the moment that he realized that law enforcement, that Bloody Sunday was about to occur. When 500 plus activists preparing to march to demonstrate for the right to vote, when they were confronted by Alabama state troopers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, March 7, 1965, as these pioneers of beloved community prepared themselves for the tear gas and the beatings to come, an exchange occurred. With state troopers under his command, Major John Cloud gave the order to disperse. "This is an unlawful assembly," he said. "Your march is not conducive to the public safety. You are ordered to disperse and go back to your church or to your homes." Standing at the forefront of the march, the response was definitive. There is no word to be had. The decree came at them with the seeming force of cosmic finality. The brutality that followed, by being televised, changed history, but not to the advantage of white supremacist terror. There was a word to be had. The next day and the day after that, and the decades to come down to our day, our days of manufactured crises, weaponized despair, and the erosion of our common public good. The poetic and prophetic actions undertaken in Selma preceded and followed by countless others, famous and not so famous, are essential still to the meaning of human history. At the center of our cultural canon, wherever beloved community is evoked, where there are always words to be had. There is so much precedent for dealing with human madness, so much righteousness to which we might yet be true. In new and surprising ways, so many avenues for dramatically conjuring up for ourselves and our fellow humans a more serious vision of what's true and lovely and good, so many words yet to be had. Do I have 5 minutes still? Close? Okay, so this is a strange one, but I wanted to bring this up before sharing the Levertov poem. Did anyone follow the red hen kerfuffle with the press secretary, the then press secretary of the White House? So so there was a moment in which our press secretary appeared at a restaurant around the time that we were becoming more aware of how asylum seekers were being treated, detention centers, all of this stuff that has risen to the top. And the owner of the Red Hen restaurant told the press secretary after some appetizers had been served that she didn't feel comfortable hosting the press secretary and her party. She asked to speak to the press secretary privately, and the press secretary said that she understood, and the appetizers were on the Red Hen, but she was asked to leave, and she did leave. And especially there were some people, some staff at the restaurant who didn't feel comfortable having them there, and it was this exercising the right to refuse service. It might not have made the news had our press secretary not gone on Twitter and told the story of that interaction, and the Red Hen was met with some aggression after that, and maybe even closed down not long after that. That gave me an image. This is such a crazy thing to try to bring up in the final moments, but I think that it is up your alley of thinking through our employers, our governments, our corporations. My image was one of a giant robot with press secretary in the eye socket of the robot looking down on the Red Hen owner. And the Red Hen owner invites the press secretary to come out of her robot and to speak to her as a human being, person to person. And they did kind of work it out. As a human being, I cannot abide. And of course, the press secretary is the Red Hen owner's employee, ultimately, as a taxpayer. This doesn't sit well with me. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. And that might have been it. But instead of it being a relationship among equals, the press secretary climbed back into the robot and pressed a button that was going to make life difficult for the Red Hen owner. My word for what was attempted and what we can attempt with each other in all different interactions, and this is crazy, but I'll be happy to talk to you about it, robot soft exorcism. Robot soft exorcism as a way of naming the granular interactions with which we can invite people to be human being among human beings. If I was in the robot trying to maintain my overhead and that robot was doing horrible things to people, I would hope that someone would spy up in the eye socket a fellow human being that they can talk to. And that is one way that I'm trying to flesh out this idea of there's always one more word to be had between human beings. Okay, let me do this poem here, and then I will step down. This is a poem by Levertov, very short, called About Political Action in Which Each Individual Acts from the Heart. When solitaries draw close, releasing each solitude into its blossoming. When we give to each other the roses of our communion. A culture of gardens, horticulture, not agribusiness, arbors among the lettuce, small terrains, when we taste in small victories sometimes the small, ephemeral, yet joyful harvest of our striving. Great power flows from us, luminous, a promise, yes. Then great energy flows from solitude and great power from communion. Thank you.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing hymn number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. Hymn number 301. We'll sing the first 3 verses. Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faith, our quest to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why, in our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between, to follow a star, to build a dream.
Spirit of love and candor, strengthen us to be conscious, aware, and alive to other people as we go out.
Please join me for the chalice extinguishing, which is written at the bottom of your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.